I've been thinking about the concept of acceptance. As a physio, dealing with people that have had shitty things happen to them. They've either been in car accidents or they're having trouble at work or they've fallen down or they've blown their knee out. Either it's acutely happened or something subtly and slowly built up on them and they're having a hard time. I find one of the biggest challenging things to help sort of redirect someone's mindset is help them accept that something is shitty or something bad has happened. And it is now their job to accept that, figure out what they need to do and kind of move on from it.
Well, I relate to it on a personal level. Like, I feel like I got really good later in my life at accepting the reality of things. But as a kid, my desire to impose my will upon the world was like huge. And a lot of that was to keep me feeling safe. That might be like identity things. As a kid, I was Catholic, and that was a huge part of who I was. And these things felt, it's hard to explain because, like, what does that have to do with acceptance? But it's like there are these eternal things that are not supposed to change. And then when reality doesn't go like that, for me, I became diabetic at like 22, 23. And I had this like invulnerability in my brain that I was fine as I was getting fatter and sicker, just ignoring the reality of that basically. And so like now you're at death's door and they've got you into the best specialist in the city in half a day. And that was brutal. A 4 or 5 year process of going like, no, I actually have diabetes. Oh, my liver's not super happy either. And I guess it's almost cheesy to say, but like, I am genuinely grateful for that forcing of the acceptance because I was on a path to die of a heart attack at 35. And instead, the reality of what was happening for me was unavoidable. And I had to change.
Your hand was forced to have to accept it. I had the same kind of thing with my eye injury. Like I got bad eye injury, ended up having 4 eye surgeries in 2 months and then like 3 more over a year and kept going from doctor to doctor and kept being like, oh, no, we got to do surgery again. And nobody at any point through that over like a year or two kind of said to me like, all right, your eye's gonna just suck forever now. So there's like a point where I had to kind of come to a bit of that realization. I was like, all right, this improvement is plateaued and now I'm going to have to just accommodate and live with this.
Did you struggle with that?
I did. From how terribly physically uncomfortable and painful everything I went through, the mental side of it ended up being way more challenging afterwards of trying to slowly deal with it. I eventually hit a point where I had to be like, nope, I need a break from medical procedures. I'm like, you can keep trying to do these things to me, but like, I appreciate your effort, but I think I need you just to back off for the moment.
Did you turn down a particular procedure? Or like, what were they trying to do that you were like, it's too much?
At the end, it was after they'd already literally like surgically moved all the muscles in my eye to make my eyeballs line up in the same direction again. And then I still had pretty terrible double vision. Then they offered to try to give me glasses with prisms in it and try to keep tinkering with it to try to see if it would improve my double vision. That can work in some situations, but it just wasn't with me. And I kept having to go in and try like put the big eye chart up on the wall. I got downgraded immediately to like, oh, okay, how many fingers am I holding up? I couldn't even see the big E on the eye chart. I was just mentally defeating. And then I put these glasses on and they wouldn't work. And I was like, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm going to figure this out myself. And I bought a pair of glasses with lenses in them with no prescription and started putting little pieces of Scotch tape over my bad eye and just realizing that blocking off the vision, like just making it opaque, but still letting light in. My brain was happier with that than putting like a patch over it. And it took the double vision away.
Your brain benefited from 2 channels of information, but you had to filter one of the channels to be the right kind of information so that it could put them together. That's so cool.
Yeah, I'd sit here and talk to you and you'd have a floating head, a blurry version of you over your left shoulder, like this little like evil person that wanted to tell you things. And my hardest thing was trying to like work and look at a screen because the vision I did have in my eye was so much more distracting than helpful that I needed to block that off. And so I progressively figured that out. And it was part of me taking the reins over of trying to problem solve it myself than keep being reliant on going to see doctors to poke and prod at me. within that, and it took over a period of months or years, I was like, okay, well, this isn't really getting all that much better anymore. I had to come to a point where I had to mourn the loss of it a little bit and realize that if I kept doing something, I could impact the neuroplasticity of it and slowly over time make my visual experience better. I think gaining some of the control piece back was what helped me mentally more. I'm still supposed to go see a glaucoma doctor and a retinal specialist every 6 months to a year, which don't like doing. And I kind of like, okay, I'll do this as a necessity.
But you don't give them the responsibility for it. That's the key. It sounds like you may use those professionals still. It's not about they can never be spoken to, but they're not supposed to be the ones driving the car.
Yeah, it's mine to own now. And that's where, like, I see the similarities between, like, my teenage kids and some of my clients that are having a hard time in the "why does this always happen to me" kind of mentality
Mm.
of not accepting, like, "Okay, yeah, you're not feeling well. What have you been doing the last day or week? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? Like, how stressed out are you? Or what is it that you could do that could change?" Being willing to look at that and being willing to address some of those things. I think younger kids and like teenagers in particular, their brain has a hard time getting to that. And a lot of people or adults later in life that end up with more sort of slow building, subtle, chronic kind of issues end up in that same kind of boat. Either they're not willing to change something or not aware of what it is they need to change, or they got in a kind of an acute accident, it was a car accident, and somebody else hit them and it was their fault, and they have a hard time just blaming it on that. You still need an acceptance piece. It's your job to start owning it.
When you're asking yourself, like, why does this happen to me? Or you're like, complaining at the universe, I think it's a good process, actually. And it's good to answer rhetorical questions. Why does this always happen to me? I often tell my clients, just try asking the rhetorical question calmly. Why does this always happen to me? Suddenly, it's a pretty good question.
It is an insightful question if you actually are willing to answer it.
Yeah. I think what happened is like actually people are trying to jump to an action in a lot of cases when they have not done the interrogation. For me, it was hard to acknowledge like my food choices have led to me and my lifestyle choices and my chronic stress have led to me having a disease you're supposed to get when you're 60 when I'm like 22. And that's like a pretty painful accounting. It took me many years.
I think particularly at a younger age too, being willing to accept that and hear that as opposed to just push back against it because you still have a sense of invincibility or this isn't supposed to happen to me. But okay, well, it did. So now where do we go from here?
You know what's funny about that though? Clients that actively argue with you, I find it so relieving. That's actually their process of coming to acceptance. They want to debate it with you because they're like, no, but it shouldn't have happened to me. And then I can get into it with them. But there's a more insidious type of resistance where the client hears you and kind of appears to get what you're saying, but you know that in their heart, they have not accepted the reality that, for example, school is going to be hard or whatever it is. So they're giving you lip service out of respect and not surfacing all these complaints they have. Some of it is just acknowledging, oh, wow, I am super pissed and resistant about this. Like, I better start there before I'm going to be able to figure out what's going on at all.
Understanding how people hold emotional tension around their organs. It's not an exact science, but a poster in my room that kind of goes through how generally you like different things you hold around your heart or your bronchial tubes or your liver is your biggest, densest organ in you, and it's tucked up under your right rib cage, crosses your midline, but there's strong pulls of it to your shoulder. That area around your liver is usually kind of where people hold anger. I pick and choose how or when I tell this to people, particularly when they come in the right shoulder sore. I can needle and loosen muscles around it. It can loosen it and come better, but it keeps coming back in a certain pattern. And just trying to suggest to them, well, that's where this is. Like, I'm not making this up. It says this on this poster over here. You can kind of feel and see this. And then they, a lot of times sheepishly, will be like, that kind of fits actually.
Yeah.
I've been really kind of, if I think about it, pretty pissed off at my boss right now.
Yes. And there's a lack of acceptance that they're pissed off. Like you pointed out, and they start to accept it. But when they
Yeah.
walked in, they were just feeling bad. They weren't
Yeah.
feeling the awareness that they were pissed off.
And they are kind of in their heart being like, why is my shoulder hurt? I didn't do anything. But I was like, well,
Yeah.
like I can make it feel better, but like there's a reasonable chance it's because your shoulder hurts because you're pissed off at your boss.
Yeah. That's been huge for me because diabetes implicates the liver and you get fatty liver, which I've had. And I did this bizarro kind of qigong type thing for a few years. It had a lot of downsides, but it also taught me a lot. And he would look at me. I never thought this by myself, and he'd just be like, "You're an angry god." I don't know what that means exactly. And then he'd like literally feel my liver and be like, "Oh my god, so much liver stress." And he'd tell me the exact same thing. This is more of a TCM qigong kind of approach. And it was so insightful. Did I like it? No. And interestingly, he tied it to what he perceived as my like kindness as well. He's like, these are related. Like you hold in the kindness and then the anger is like gotta go somewhere because you try to keep the kindness out front. And it was extremely insightful and awkward to hear and not super pleasant to think about because you want to think of yourself maybe like you were saying as more of a victim and less of an angry god. But then that metaphor is kind of helpful because you think like, oh, what kind of influence do I have on the people around me? And suddenly you're more tuned into what is actually happening, which is kind of the theme of the conversation around acceptance is related to like, can I see the truth?
We're social beings. We live in a social dynamic. We want to be polite or just give off the air of that we are holding our shit together in
Yeah,
different
exactly.
scenarios. But that's got to go somewhere, and your body holds it. And then if you never really acknowledge it or have an outlet or like a steam release valve for it, your
Yeah.
body starts talking to you, and you have to understand it before you can accept it.
You're making me think about the internal and external acceptance. Because thinking about something we've talked about on past chats, there's like a wall people hit with the system, whether it's the health system or the medical system or the education system, where they just can't believe that it's letting them down. Like they can't
Mhm.
believe that they're not getting the accommodations that are legally entitled. And they say, but I'm legally entitled to it. And I say like, but it won't be provided. Just as a matter of fact, it's not going to be provided. I think I had a client who actually went through legitimate grief.
I see it all the time in the healthcare system where people have a lot of faith in their doctors and the system, or something goes wrong with them, that there'll be some answer or somebody there to help you. I was like, yeah, that would be ideal of how this can work. But just so you understand, that's not how this is going to work. So
Yeah.
there's a much bigger role for you to do this. Like there's not just a team out there, that SWAT team is going to come out and fix this for you. You got to figure out where your role is because it's bigger than you think.
I think what people do, they want to like hide hopelessly when that happens. And the idea that they have to step up and take responsibility is so scary that in many cases they just want to kind of say like, F it, there's nothing for me. It's not true. But like the clients who do face the reality that nobody is coming to save them, but that there are resources which can help them, they have good outcomes in the end. And I think maybe that's part of the talking about the acceptance to clients is explaining how it's hopeless to depend on somebody to save you, but it's very hopeful to use the resources in your environment to help yourself. It's just not something that we teach. Just to get a bit philosophical, there's like this kind of thing from the post-war to now that's like society's your daddy and your mommy, and it's going to take care of you in that way. Or maybe it's like society is not, it's just a military, screw the government on the right. But the idea that society is there as a resource and a tool and a structure, but not your parents, is a middle ground I don't think that we actually think about very much. Society can be powerful. It doesn't have to run your life and make your choices. It can still afford you great things.
That's where I think there's a strong importance of people starting to learn about what other people's jobs are. Not just the sort of tunnel that you've gone in to learn about, but like what do other people do? What do lawyers do? What do doctors do? What do physios do? Like people don't understand that very well. That again, that's one of the parts that I do like about my job. Everybody does get hurt. So I see people of different professions. See, I treat a lot of health professionals of a broad scope, and I always pick the brain about like how does this work or how does that work, kind of thing. And a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do that. So if you do run into challenges, you don't know what is out there to help you and what's not out there to help you.
I think it's not just people's jobs, but people don't even understand what's reasonable to other people for breakfast. You ever say, if you're not a guy who eats breakfast, I'm not a person who really eats breakfast that much. If you meet someone who thinks breakfast is the most important meal of the day, they think you're insane. They don't really know that there are people who eat like that and that they're okay. And like, similarly, they don't know that some people need to go for a run to de-stress, and some people need to go talk, and some people need to be in a quiet room with their hands over their ears. And so you have this kind of locked in version of what life is supposed to be. I actually think it hurts the acceptance thing because you don't have a broad set of models of the different ways that people exist. I love the idea of you thinking more about what is a nurse practitioner? What is that person doing? What happens when they wake up in the morning? What are they thinking about for work? And also, like, what are different lifestyles?
I see that a lot of people have trouble with is actually understanding that there's a broad spectrum of how sensitive people's nervous systems are. How you experience the world versus how somebody else experienced the world. But at an actual physiological level, people's nervous systems, some of them are very, very sensitive. Like little noises might sound like huge things that viscerally hurt them. And other people can just tune out everything or have no sensation or awareness of their body and kind of everything in between. You get kind of caught in what your perception is. You don't realize how differently we are all kind of constructed.
And if you don't know your own nervous system and you're out there watching the Kardashians and the Elon Musks of the world be extremely extroverted in public, there is like a sense of shame people who are ambitious have that they're not built like that. It's like they just don't have a model that that's one type of doer. And other doers are much more quiet and they're not performing constantly. And both of those are okay ways to be. Those are both really useful. And either of those temperaments dysfunctional with low acceptance is worse than either of those temperaments when they can manage who they are in the world, which I often refer to as learning to play your instrument. Or kids who are neurodiverse, one of my favorite metaphors is you have a Ferrari, and if you drive a Ferrari wrong, you break it. You have to be a good driver to drive a Ferrari. So that's your life,
Yeah.
buddy. You're going to crash
Yeah.
your car, you're going to go fast. Those are your options.
That's what I tell people when I sort of explain to them that you are genetically loose jointed. You're very hypermobile. Like all your joints are put together more loosely, which will make you more flexible, can be helpful, but it is a much harder biomechanical task to coordinate and hold everything together to sit and stand against gravity. So this is something you're going to have to accept. This isn't something that needs to heal. You're going to be like this forever. There is more importance that you learn how to move well and how to stay still well than your average person. Otherwise, you're going to keep hurting yourself and being annoyed as to why that happens. And
Yeah. And I guess what you choose to pay attention to, like you've talked about this in past episodes, how we entertain ourselves to death with an attention economy that's constantly asking us to pay attention to external things that may or may not be rewarding to us. And maybe there's a really complicated part of acceptance is an attentional skill. Can you bring the beam of attention to what is happening, not what could be happening or what people are telling you about what's happening, but what is actually happening? And so it's interesting because maybe there's a attention piece to acceptance. And it's also making me realize like that's probably what I'm doing with my clients sometimes because I control some of the resource of attention in the clinical relationship. And so I can say like, I think we need to pay attention to the reality of your IEP. And by putting that on the agenda, it helps this person tune in to accept the reality of their situation.
more things trying to pull us away, our internal sort of mindfulness away from us to it's easier and easier to dissociate, to just entertain yourself or do something else. I was doing a little bit more reading of DBT therapy, and the first thing it talks about
Fascinating.
is mindfulness, which whether it's like cognitive or DBT therapy or physio or trying to get people to understand how to learn about themselves, you do have to be able to look inward and sit with it for a few minutes.
It's interesting because DBT was invented as a suicide prevention therapy primarily, and then it's broadened and it's really useful. What an interesting thought that part of suicide prevention is attending to what is actually happening right now. It really gets at the way in which believing that things are pervasive and permanently bad and in this kind of negative stereotype is a disabling mental state. And another part of DBT is distress tolerance. So feel what is occurring, acknowledge the distress you're feeling, and allow the distress to exist. It's really hard to do. And also, let's just take a second and say, if you're dealing with a BPD diagnosis or any kind of diagnosis where you need DBT, that's a courageous person who is owning that need to. They have a hypersensitive nervous system and they make a choice to feel the distress and allow it. It's a very courageous thing to do. And I've seen it be incredibly effective for people.
I've seen clients and various people that have had some level of interaction with it. It's because you hear a lot more about the CBT, like the cognitive
Yeah.
behavioral therapy, but in certain consequences, you can see as the DBT thing seems like harder, but the right thing and the key thing to do.
I think there's a third therapy that is used in BPD and other personality challenges that we're missing called mentalization-based therapy, which is also developing accurate cognitions about what other people are thinking and feeling. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of related to
Yes.
what we're talking about today. So if you can tolerate distress better and hold a truer feeling about what the person you're talking to who's distressing you is actually thinking and feeling and not a stereotyped or paranoid version of that, it's incredibly powerful. And it's basically like what's going on in other people's minds.
Yeah.
What you were saying before about knowing people's jobs too. To get out of that locked in mentality, you need other thoughts about what other people are doing, thinking, feeling, and how that's supposed to interact with you.
It's the root of being able to be empathetic towards somebody is having some level of understanding of what they do or how they're feeling, which some people have a lot harder time with.
And we are told to be empathetic. So if you're told to be empathetic and you don't have that feeling, what you end up doing is oppressing people with your guess about what they feel. For example, I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to offend you. No, you're the person who gets super offended by anything. I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Empathy towards me is saying it. You're actually just putting your way of thinking about the world onto me as a way of being nice. But
Mhm.
actually, the lack of empathy is creating distance.
It's where people that are inherently quite judgmental assume everybody else is thinking terribly about them. So then they reactively think terribly about others as well. And it's this terrible vicious cycle. Like
Yeah.
they start by learning to actually be nice to themselves and how they think about themselves. And then
Yep.
you start being a little bit more empathetic towards the other people around you as well.
Pretty sure judgment has a disgust element. And for me personally, just learning like I have an intense disgust response that goes away. It's not like I don't know how to say it. It's just like a quick flash of disgust lots of the time. And accepting, oh, that's a feeling people feel. It leads to judgment and it's disgust. And I tell students, let's feel disgusted. Where are you feeling that? Oh, the front of the mouth. You're like spitting it out, right? That's where it comes from. It comes from not getting poisoned by a food, but you're having that feeling about, the chorus of that song. It's interesting to become aware of that and how those base emotions then lead to this whole cognitive flow.
Hmm, that's interesting. What kind of things disgust you?
Well, I mean, truly, like the one thing I don't even want to talk about it is like spotted things, like polka dots, but like real life kind of, I don't even let's move on. But, if I'm being more honest with you, I think when you're a kid, maybe you're defended in certain ways. So it's not primary, the disgust, it's a reaction. But for me, it was like anyone doing anything out of place, which is ironic because I love being out of place. And that's why I said it's a reaction. And that is how the moral part of our brain seems to work. It just goes like, expected or not expected, expected or not expected. So someone would do something out of schema, something like answer in a way I didn't understand or be impolite in a way I didn't understand. And in my immediate judge, like have almost like front of the face. And I wanted to suppress that, like do what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
That would sound like a worst case scenario for life, that people would always do what you're expecting and never give you any variety. So it's like a reaction that creates a hell for me based on my personal temperament.
Reactivity is the opposite of mindfulness. Like taking a sec to be like, okay, they just did that or just said that. I hear that, and that now I can choose to react or not to react, but as opposed to just immediately do something.
And I can know it's true. I can just go, oh, wow, I got a bit of a disgust reaction to that. Like it changes the emphasis, and you're like, and you go from thinking about that person's behavior to your reaction. And the positive version of that is tuning into when somebody does something and you love it. And you're like, dude, I'm having so much fun right now. Like I'm having so much fun right now in this conversation. And like tuning into that's happening for me is also important, and not just autopiloting through that experience is kind of the opposite of tuning into your disgust. Maybe you tune into your disgust and you choose to pull back on some of that way of reacting, and you start to feel when you feel the pull towards, and you start to grow that.
Getting the opportunity to be like, why does that bother me so much? Right? For a bunch of little things. That's where, the concept of
Yeah.
triggers, like
Yeah.
you might come from how your dad talked to you in a certain context.
Exactly.
Somebody said something in a tone, and you're like, and you don't realize it, but like that, that's why that pisses me off.
Literally, I had this experience in therapy where I tuned in with like a 15, 16-year-old part of myself that would fight for me so hard, too hard, destructively. And I kind of had suppressed it for a long time in my life. But I needed it to do this situation. And it came out. It was like a part I hadn't heard from in a while. And I felt so much gratitude to have it back. And like, no, you're not allowed to run the show. Like, you're a 15-year-old. But if I need a 15-year-old to get in there and tell someone this is wrong, I need you there. And that was it's almost weird to talk about it, but it was like a very spiritual, integrative experience.
Interesting.